You're just like, what is...
I'm waving for the beginning.
Okay. All right. That's our opening? Hello, everybody, and welcome to Aetheryte Radio Gamer Escape's Final Fantasy XIV podcast. I'm Fusion X, and joining me today, we have Xenedra, and joining us again, we've got Bill Murray, and we've got Rook.
Hello.
What's up?
Double hello.
So we got a couple little bits of news, and then today we're going to talk about all of the Tales from the Shadow stories that have been coming out over the past few weeks. So first off, we've got the second Final Fantasy XIV orchestral album. So it's Volume 2. It's now available on the Square Enix store. It's got 8 tracks on it. I don't know what they are because there's no track list. Even on the special site, I didn't see a track list, which is super weird.
I looked far and wide for that track list. I could not find it.
I
looked on YouTube to see if somebody illegally uploaded it to hear it. I couldn't find it, so I tried.
It's funny. I've seen a couple Japanese Twitter accounts tweet it out, but of course, it's in Japanese, so that doesn't really do me.
Do you see any numbers? Because we can make that happen.
Numbers
to prove it's the track list, like.
Oh no, I know it's the track list, but
they say that on the description.
Send it, son.
It's in a photo. It's not like I can just Google. Well, I mean, I guess I could if I use. Anyway. So that's out. I mean, there's like Worm's Tales probably on there. That's something new that they're doing for the second concert, which just happened yesterday or last night in Japan. So that's cool. We went to the one they did out in LA a couple years ago, which was a lot of fun. So yeah, you can check that out if you want to get that. It should be shipping now.
Yep.
In theory. So I know some friends that have had some issues with the Shadowbringers OST pre-order, so get it from Square, or if you can find it from somewhere else, get it from somewhere else. But yeah, it should be a good listen. So make sure to check that out. And that's just a CD. It's not a Blu-ray. It's not anything crazy. So if you want some tunes for your car, there you go. If your car still even has the CD player, not a lot of cars have CD players anymore. It's weird.
It's so true.
So strange. My wife, her new car. I'm like, where's the CD player? She's like, what?
I have a phone for that.
Right?
Do you know of Bluetooth?
This computer doesn't have a floppy drive. It's madness. 30% off Mog Station sale going on now. So if there's anything that you want to pick up from that, make sure to head over there and check that out.
I don't know about you guys, but it's way cheaper to just buy 10 dies off the Mog Station when they're 30% off than try and get them off the Marquee board.
Yeah. On
my servers.
You could get your Fender motorcycle. You could get your whale mount. You could get some dances, all sorts of stuff.
Someone gifted me a whale mount, and I was like, "What do I do with this?"
You just
have a picnic in the sky.
It's so big and obnoxious.
You take your beautiful eternal bond partner out for a nice dinner on top of your whale. I mean, obviously.
You the one who did it too. That's the funny thing.
You bust out your Legend of Zelda glamour, and you just do a whole bunch of tweets for Link's Awakening.
I was gonna say, hey, if someone wanted to gift me a panda mount, that'd be good. But next week is our 8th week in Titan Savage, and I'm the last person in line to get the mount, so I'll be using that.
There you go. All right.
Also, remember, Fenrir mount, if you have not purchased that yet, at the beginning of an expansion, it has all of the Go Fasty coding in it, so it doesn't matter what area you're in. If you're still stuck on the ground, you're going as fast as you possibly can.
That's the technical term for it, right? The Go Fasty coding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's account-wide, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is nice. Awesome.
Not a lot of stuff is nowadays.
Yeah.
I remember I bought which one was it? The white Magitech mount, because those were like the first mounts that came out on the Mog Station. I'm like, yeah, I'll get one, and then I redeemed it on the wrong character.
Oh, no. You know what I did? I got one of those friend code thingamabobs on a third account, which is not active anymore, but it was active for a bit, and I put it on the wrong account also.
Yeah. Well, the worst part is, right, because it was the first mounts on the Mog Station, they didn't have a support system in place to deal with that.
They still don't. Their support system is, don't screw it up.
Yeah, ridiculous.
You clicked the wrong thing.
In my defense, maybe I shouldn't have 10 mules with the same name on different servers, so... All right, so that's going to take us into our discussion here. Over the past few weeks, Square Enix, as they usually do around this time, they put out stories kind of helping to fill in the lore behind the scenes for the expansion and the story. So this time around, it's Tales from the Shadows. and it does a little bit of a dive here for, we've got Thancred, we've got I'm blanking Estinian. That was the second one. I'm like, I read all of these, and then the third one we get kind of an interesting perspective on Sid, and then Emmett Selk, which is the one that everybody wants to hear more of, I think, after finishing MSQ.
We'll save the best for last.
There you go. Yeah, so let's go
I
ahead.
don't know. I rate them by how many tears I cried for each.
I don't know if I really
saved.
I don't know if I really cried for any of them.
I definitely had like no, none of that, but a couple of
Oh, okay. So let's go ahead and Bill, go ahead and let's go through these.
Okay, so I think we're going to go in order in which they were published, and so the first one is called One Name, One Promise, and it deals with the story of Thancred and his backstory and how he's interacted with Louisoix and young Acilia and old Menphilia and the new Menphilia, who is now Irene. So are we able to post those?
Yep,
those
I got
links?
it.
Already
Awesome.
done.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. So it deals with the his formative years, which is really good. We know from the lore book and from his past that he grew up in Limsa Mensa, in their notorious pirate underbelly, I guess you could say. This was all before Admiral Merylwib did her reform and try to clean up the streets a little bit.
The streets and the seas.
Yeah. It's, I don't know. On my server, Limsa is just kind of the place for people AFK, and it gets a little, I don't know. I don't like to hang out there,
Well,
dark.
It's because that market board is just right there, which is really
I know
funny.
It's convenient. I get that.
Yeah. And just think, back in the day, we had that 1.0 cinematic, and they had the Aetheryte up there, at the second story of the tower, and they're like, no, that's actually going to be a really bad place because they were expecting so much foot traffic there. That would have been way better to have it up there.
At least for me, when I'm like, I need to turn in some crap at the Grand Company right now.
Well, keep in mind, this is when they were getting ready to unveil the hit new questing system known as Guild Leaves.
Whoa, man, that took off. Okay. I think it's interesting that I don't know, I look at all the cutscenes with Thancred right now, and he's got kind of this, I don't know, what do you call it, like a salt and pepper kind of hair or whatever, but the way that it's described in the story is that he has silver hair. That's actually the color that they used, and he's always had this, so it's not like a sign of age. And this made me start to think, like, how old is he really? And I know it's, Square Enix and Koji Fox, they've been very careful as to not put down like hard and fast timelines as to how much time has passed between certain expansions. So everything I'm saying here is speculative, based just other than things that we know. So we do know, though, according to the first lore book on page 190.
Look it up with us.
There. Yeah.
Get your lore books out.
According to patch 3.3, that is when Thancred was
just within
32
reach.
years old. Okay.
Well, mine's up here on the shelf. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah. Mine is also right over there. But
just in case, I wanted to make sure.
This is within arm's length here.
Everyone, I know. Mine are always within arm's length. Okay, so yeah, so he's got
nerds.
Yeah, there you go.
Big old nerd time.
Well, this is nerd out time. Okay. Anyway,
sure.
So at patch 3.3, and that's when we go and we fight Nidhogg on the final steps of Faith. And, I guess that it's pretty reasonable to speculate that the events of Stormblood, the 4.0 events, are maybe about a year long. So, okay, let's just guess that's 33. And then we know that he spent 5 years of experience on the first. Okay, so he's pushing around 40 years of experience. Now, I don't want to say 40 years old because I thought about this. I don't know if these scions are actually aging on the first, because it's not even like their real selves, not even their real bodies. Okay, so I'm just kind of, that's why I said he's pushing 40 years of experience, big air quotes here for those listening on the podcast. Anyway, that's the thing. It's like he's got this hair where, okay, around the age of 40, yeah, okay, it's gonna start to look that way. But the point is, he's always had that hair color. That's what I was getting at. So there you go. Next time you're on Jeopardy, you will know the answer to that question, or the question to that answer.
Yeah, the time bubble is always such a weird way, in trying to measure, the span of events and stuff. I mean, I remember going through like Final Fantasy 11, right? There's all these expansion packs, all these storylines. 1 year, that's one Vanadil year that game happens in, everything, and it's just like it's a hell of a year.
It's especially strange too, because I mean, Thancred and Minfilia in particular, who are kind of the focus of this first story, there's some of the characters that we know span the timeline into 1.0, and some of the things that happened in 1.0 actually carried over for them in 2.0 and beyond. And it's been kind of one of those weird gaps in the game to not know about their earlier years if you came in 2.0 or later, or maybe you never read any of the supplemental stuff. And so it was really cool actually seeing that kind of addressed both in Shadowbringers and now in this lore, edition that we have through the story, to kind of go, oh wait, hold on, their experience, those years of experience, all of that history kind of spans outside of this, and there was kind of important context there that we needed to know about all of this as we got into the relationship with Reen and all of this that develops in Shadowbringers.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I can remember playing back in 1.0, and it never felt like, it felt just like a friendly relationship. Obviously, they were close, but the more we hear about it here, and the more we see obviously now in Shadowbringers, it's definitely more of like a father-daughter relationship than like just like a friendly, like, oh, she's like my sister. No, it's higher than that. And so it's always interesting to hear a little bit more about that, and to remind people like, hey, like, her dad was like a Garlean spy, and like there was a lot of stuff going on back then that they never, like, they came back to remind us that was a thing, but that was it. Like, they don't go into more depth and elaborate on what, if that was going to be a major plot line in 1.0, or it's just, it was a thing, and that's it.
That's a good kind of segue to kind of seeing how it all puts together back in this story. It goes into, like I said, it talks about his past while he was there in Limsa, and talks about how he was he was very passionate about what he did. He was very agile. He had kind of a sharp mind, and upon hearing that there was this wealthy trader arriving at the Limsa docks, Thancred thought he would go and try to rob this guy and take his money. Little did he know that this foreigner was the great scholar Louis Soir, who knew this was coming and used his magics to bind Thancred's hands and knock him on his back before any sort of theft could take place. I wish there was a cutscene for this. I think that would be hilarious.
I would love to see this.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah. So, but it's very interesting there, because this is a kind of a pivotal change for him, to where he's thinking, okay, I'm about to be thrown into prison. Things are about to be bad. But Louis Soir kind of like took him off to the side, introduced himself. They got to know each other, and saw this as kind of like, okay, this is a person that's obviously talented. He's gifted. How can I take that in and kind of focus him in the right direction and use his skills for good? And, Thancred might not have, chosen the life that he had up to this point, but he was able to make the choice to choose to accept this great scholar's invitation, and ultimately he moved with him. Well, obviously Louis Soir already lived there in Charlayan, but that's when actually he moved there right at that point. And one of the interesting things too is that we learn that the surname of Thancred, which is Waters, and we've known this, this surname was actually insisted upon by Louis Soir himself. And Waters actually comes from Thaliak, which, as we know, is the guardian of rushing rivers and the purveyor of knowledge. And I just kind of thought it was interesting, because we really didn't know the origin of his surname. We knew what it was. It's been in the lore book. But now that we know that it comes from Louis Soir, and it's interesting to see that he received that name in this pivotal ship of his life, where he is changing kind of where he's going and what he's doing and how he's redirecting things. And that's going to be really important, because it obviously was influential on him, because he's going to take that and he's going to be the one, this is Thancred, in giving young Asilia her new name, Minfilia. And of course, we know from the 5.0 story, he's the one that gets to name little Minfilia into Reen. And that's because of the influence of Louis Soir. I thought that was absolutely fascinating.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and it's nice that they bring that up too, because it's like, hey, remember the 12 were a thing. Remember, yeah, the naming. Yeah, that's totally That was it. That's all I had. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I love that because we see, like we've all brought up here, you see so many things come full circle with that. One, we have this reference to the 12, who we now have a totally different perspective on, possibly with some of the lore that has come about with Shadowbringers. But you also kind of get this full circle with his story and the title of this whole short story, One Name, One Promise, which just automatically tells us that there's something important about naming. And whether that is, I mean, this idea of a fresh start, or it's sort of names a lot of times are tied into identity, who we are as people, how we present ourselves, how the world sees us. And there's all these sort of intricacies that are tied up in that. And the idea of like naming somebody as well, that sort of parental act, or that, you know, you're starting new, let me give you a fresh start. It's so interesting to see Thancred take this journey from being somebody who needed a new direction in life, who was literally just kind of wandering aimlessly, who is just living every day, day by day, to then get this new identity, this new opportunity. And then finally, in the end, be able to come full circle here with Rain and give her the exact same sort of future that he was given, while also letting go of the past, which is just like, it's just so good. It's such good storytelling, you know?
How does your heart feel?
It hurts, but good, but like a good hurt.
It's so full.
It's so wonderful. So much detail that you just don't even think about.
I appreciate that. That's really, really good feedback. Okay, I'm just kind of looking to see where we're at here. Okay, the story also kind of talks about how Thancred, as a pupil of Louisoix, grew with his talents. He was respected by the wider society. He was obviously equipped to infiltrate difficult locations, as well as charm the merchants and the socialites. He wasn't this young boy from the streets of Limsa. He was a confident youth. He was able to pose as a confidant until he acquired the information that his clients required. And after his skills were recognized, that is the time when he received the Archon sigil on his neck. And of course, this is something that brought Louisoix a lot of joy.
I really liked this in particular because I think they actually say it in the story itself, but it definitely shows too that the people in Sharlayan understand, accept, and even uphold people who do basically dirty work, but for a good reason.
Everybody's got their own thing. Like, it's interesting because you see Thancred, right? He goes from this little scamp, like, oh, I'm gonna rob this old guy, to like now he's like Sharlayan's like 007.
Yeah. I mean, basically, right? And in a lot of societies, yeah. I think in our main three that we start with, and in reality, people are like, oh, spies, I don't know about that. But the Sharlayans, they're like, no, totally necessary, very helpful, thank you. Here, have a medal,
Yeah, and it speaks to their society. The idea that for them, it isn't necessarily a moral question, it's a question of knowledge and skill. So if you are exceptionally skilled in something that can be applied and used in the world, then that's recognized as its own value. And he's given a place to operate, somewhat legally within, his skill set and abilities that kind of puts him on this path.
Gold star Thancred. Here's your tattoo. Purple wiggle Thancred. I don't know.
I think connecting him to like James Bond, I think that's like wholly appropriate.
Especially with all the lady killing.
Yeah. Well, just even in some of the more recent movies, James Bond is trying to protect this young woman and, changes his identity and that sort of stuff. So anyway, so story tells a little bit more about how he met young Acilia. Now we've seen this cutscene a variety of times. It's both in 1.0 and in the current game. We know that she lost her father. We know that she was ultimately adopted, and that the issues with the father and having the run-ins with the Garlean operatives, that's actually was a big deal. One of the times Thancred had to kind of intervene and to deal with some of them, knowing that because he was not paying attention when Acilia's father was killed, he felt really bad about that. And so he kind of decided that he needed to take upon this protector role. And as the Garlean operatives kept on coming, he had to go to Acilia and say, like, look, I think it's best for you to take upon a new name, take upon a new identity, just to kind of protect yourself. And he was the one that changed Acilia's name to Minfilia Ward. Okay, so it's interesting that he gave her that name in the same way that Louisoix gave Thancred his last name. I just think that's really meaningful, and of course that gives the context to Thancred giving Reen her name in the 5.0 main story.
I think it's like it's meaningful in both versions, right? But I think the naming for Reen is more impactful because this is more of a like, hey, like, can we just not deal with the Garleans anymore? Like, it's just like we should do this and this will help things. But this one was more of like an actual like character moment, I think. I
think it fills out some of the background for the naming of Reen, because in both places, there's almost a kind of a shift in responsibilities. You know, Acilia was just kind of someone who was there in Ul'dah, and now she's kind of playing, you know, in a disguise. You know, the story goes on and says that how she's kind of dressed up like a miner, and Thancred is really impressed at her devotion to, you know, to her craft. And then, of course, when Reen gets named, it's at the point to where she has gone from, I don't know what I should do, nobody really likes me, I'm just a big burden to everybody, to, no, I'm going to take this destiny and I'm going to own it for myself. And, you know, she kind of grows up there. So.
Did anybody else think about Tataru mining when I talked about Minfilia, like, geared up? That was like my first thought that my brain went to.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I thought about her later.
Oh man, we're gonna get to that.
It's interesting because this sort of like middle ground is almost the relationship, at least at this point, between Minfilia and Thancred is kind of like a middle ground for his life, right? We have him coming out of this sort of like rough background, now becoming a spy, and then encountering somebody that's going to change the way that he perceives and interacts with the world from then on out. And it's so complicated too, because he's been sort of a part of the situation that robbed Minfilia of all of these things, and he's realizing that even though he's achieved something great and he has these skills, that there may be repercussions outside of that affect him as a person, and whether or not he wants to do something different with his life, and whether or not, you know, his naming of Minfilia at this time is something that really feels like a genuine fresh start for her as a person, or it's something that's more like he feels this burden of guilt. You know, he has to help her, so he has to get her relocated, he has to do all of this stuff. Whereas by the time we eventually hit Reen, it's almost like, I don't know, there, like you were saying, there's something more significant about that. It's almost like that's an act of forgiveness for the things he's done, and looking forward for the future, as opposed to being tangled up in all these other things. And it does feel different, which is something that struck me too while I was reading over everything. Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting because it's not like Reen has an actual father figure, right, on the first that we see get trampled by a Gubu or anything. But maybe at this point, Thancred's,
you know, have one.
Ranjit.
Well, yeah.
He does not get trampled, though.
Oof. No. But it's, you know, it's one of those things where
it's
trampler. Like it's not like a redemption arc necessarily, because there's not enough things that are the same.
His redemption arc is kind of like redemption for himself, being kind of.
There's definitely some guilt that he feels like he needs to deal with, though.
Yeah.
And there's a whole transition to that from the beginning of the 5.0 story till the end of it. I mean, you can see that.
Yeah.
Is a character arc for him.
Yeah.
So. It's interesting too. The story kind of shifts a little bit, and it moves to the first, and it shows kind of that really cool cutscene that we saw the very first time in FanFest, where he's down under Yulmore and he's running with, I'm just going to call her Reen for the sake of the story. You know, he rescues her, and he sees this as kind of the story specifically says that as he is rescuing her, he is recalling his previous memory of kind of protecting Minfilia and being kind of at her side. We also learn, I think this is interesting, that one of the motivations for his shift from being that rogue job to a gunbreaker was his desire to be a protector. Okay, so it wasn't just that, oh, we need to kind of get the Gunbreaker into the story, let's put someone in there. You know, he actually took upon the tank role instead of the DPS as you know, due to the motivation of wanting to protect Minfilia and now Reen. I mean, he literally changed jobs for a girl.
I think it's interesting too. I mean, and I had this thought, and I was saving it for this part when we were talking about when he got his name. Obviously, you know, purveyor of knowledge. He's not like textbook knowledge, right? He's has a completely different skill set
and brings it.
But there's
experiential
that
knowledge.
Other side of the coin for Thaliak, right? The idea that you know, like a guardian of rivers flow of time. He's, you know, like maybe there's a little bit of like a loose connection there.
You know, something that I hadn't actually, until we were sitting here talking about this and we were breaking it down in this way, something I hadn't thought about at all is the symbolism of where Minfilia literally turns back the tide in the first. And the idea that we have this sort of parallel, and it was probably my least favorite zone in all of Shadowbringers, but maybe that's about to change because it's you know, the kind of Ul'dah-esque area all around Amarang, and the mining. You know, we literally have a dungeon where you go down into the mine, and the fact that where her life pivoted and changed is actually where she ends up on the first to turn back this tide, almost like she did in a sense on her own home plane, is so interesting. And the fact that all of these really important interactions that we see between Thancred and Reen almost all exclusively take place with that backdrop. It's so fantastic. I honestly had never even thought about this, that him stepping up to be a protector in many ways was likely inspired by seeing how hard Minfilia worked and, you know, her mining and all of this sort of thing. And now we get this backdrop for a lot of those big scenes, or the fight with Ranjit where his sword ends up in the ground and he has, I think, officially become a protector against the backdrop of the place where all of these things happened for them, in a sense. And it's really cool story detail that I just didn't even think about, honestly.
I was so worried at that fight, because the fight feels like it goes on way longer than it needs to. And then Thancred is just, he is not looking good at the end of that. And I got the sense, I'm like, oh, don't do it. Don't kill Thancred off. Why would you do this to me? Luckily they didn't. But it was
dead.
Yeah, I was very worried there.
I mean, I did fail that fight one time, so.
It happens.
I didn't know how the freaking, like, holding his breath thing worked.
it was interesting, though, right? Because you know, we talk about, right, he moved over to Gunbreaker, but at the same time he still had those like rogue skills, and to be able to see that play in battle like that was really cool, to do that role play with him. So
this one got approximately 2 to 3 tiers, specifically at the part where he walks Minfilia home, and it's like, all right, go see Philomene, go have a home, go have a life with your semi-mom.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of thinking, like, I could go in there. That could be me.
Nope. But it's not. Yeah.
And I'm just like,
are we gonna rank these stories on a 1 to 5 tier scale?
I mean, actually, I'm just I don't know. I'm rating them on how many tears I actually cried. Like,
okay. You know,
one fell, and there were 2 more that were kind of like.
Another thought that I had, you know, talking about when he goes and grabs Minfilia, now Reen, from the dungeon Yulmore, was, are we going to see this? Is this going to be part of that Grand Cosmos dungeon if it's in Yulmore?
Wherever it may be.
It would make sense to be able to go down in there at some point, right?
It looks too nice, though, right?
Well, wait, maybe we go down.
I still think it's going to be in Ilmeg, because the screenshots that we have are in Ilmeg, and that castle.
That's true. I forgot about Ilmeg. Yeah.
I think that's the best.
At some point, we're gonna go to the dungeon. At some point, it'd be weird if we didn't.
For me, the thing that makes me think Ilmeg is because the armor and those gates look very much Guardian.
We just talked about this last week. I'd completely forgotten everything about it being in Ilmeg.
It's gonna be someplace entirely different. It's buried in the sands in Amarang or something. And we're gonna be like, well, we sure all were wrong.
Next week, you're gonna be like, it's in that tall building in the Tempest. You're just gonna keep changing your mind.
It's the Capitol building. Yeah.
That's one of the things that was already brought up. Like, those windows are awfully ornate. That's kind of Amarati. Plus Cosmos, you know.
Oh, there you go.
It's in every single place, so none of us are wrong.
Well, we know it can't be on the source because it's going to bring your trust, and your trusts are still stuck on the first.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So last little bit that we get out of that story, and oh my gosh, we're like not even a fourth of the way done. Okay. Right.
Don't worry about it.
I thought it was interesting that they went out of their way to give a paragraph to talk about like her jail cell down there in the bottom of Yulmore, and it was like bottom, like below sea level bottom, like you can't even see it from the outside. You know, if you were to like walk into Yulmore, usually you can either take the elevator up or you can go up the stairs like most people do. But I imagine that elevator goes down. And it made a point to talk about how, like, although her bedroom is just kind of like all the basic things, like, you know, bed and a desk and stuff like that, but it had a massive bookshelf with lots and lots of books in it. I'm thinking, like, why in the world would they even say that? But I'm thinking, okay, that actually explains why, while she's there visiting Urianger in his library, that she wants to borrow a book. And it's like, okay, you know, she's interested in learning, she's educated, she wants to grow. Okay. Nice little.
And I hadn't thought about this, but this is literally Elizabeth from BioShock Infinite. She's a prisoner, but maybe doesn't feel quite like a prisoner. She likes to read.
Anyway,
Big shrugs.
I played it. Sorry. Sure thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And of course, as he's you know, rescuing her, you know, he makes this point at the end of the story. You know, he says, okay, I'm going to make things right this time. You know, he wasn't paying attention back in Old Daw, back in 1.0. Now he's got a chance. Now he's going to make it right, and it's good. It's a good story.
Won't let any Goobos near her.
Right.
Or her friends.
Which is funny because they're right out there in Calusia.
They're just hanging out.
Being terrible monsters that fly with their arms going like this in the air.
They're so cute. I love them. They're not murderers. It was an accident.
Anything else?
No, I think that was it for Thancred. Yeah, it's interesting to get a little bit of backstory with Thancred and Philia, because I feel like there's always just a little bit more that they can tell, and especially now that we have Reen, they've kind of passed the torch, right? So we'll get even more stuff coming up in Shadowbringers, and I think, you know, for Thancred, right, Minfilia is just like that girl he can't quit, right? Like it's always going to be lingering there in the back of his mind somehow. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops in the patch series for sure.
I'm kind of excited because, you know, for a while we thought, oh, Minfilia's gone, she's dead, she's now the word of the mother, and she didn't really do much. And now we're learning, actually, she's done a lot for us, and now she's actually, okay, she's now a pretty important, you know, character in the story going far, and you know, so I like that she's relevant now. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you know.
Plus,
we had that.
Oh, sorry.
That teaser at FanFest, and you know, the name drops Minfilia, and we're all kind of like, "Oh, she's back!" Like, yeah. Yay!
Cool.
We're less reluctant now, so
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I no link pearls
story.
in the first with her, so we're all right. Right. Please continue.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay, so the second story deals with Estinian, and it is called Echoes of Delusion. And boy, are there puns in that. And we don't learn about it until the very last line. Kind of interesting. So it tells the story from Estinian's perspective from the time when he rescued the Warrior of Light from the Gimlet Dark back in 4.55. Spoilers, by the way, for those of you that haven't been around for.
Remember that? That was a thing that happened.
Yeah,
they showed it with one image and a little bit of text.
Yeah,
that was all we got to see.
I like, man, his what he did in 4.0 was so good. I mean, talk about a redemption arc.
I would love to see more Estinian.
Yeah. Oh, I hope we do. I hope he becomes a trust. That's the thing. He needs to become a trust. Okay. All right. So, so we get the story from that particular point until he actually sets out on his journey to eradicate the Black Rose facilities where he meets our buddy Gaius. So, excuse me. After delivering the Warrior of Light to the Ishgardian Infirmary, we see that Estinian quickly returned to the battlefield because he feels that he is more useful fighting than sitting around with the Warrior of Light. And a lot of the story is kind of Estinian thinking, okay, is this really something I should be doing? Is this a waste of my time? Or is this something that actually is something that would be worthwhile for his efforts? Unfortunately, once he got to the battlefield, Xenos had withdrawn and there was not really much to do there. So I'm not quite sure why he did this, but he thought, oh, I'm just going to wander around the snowy fields of Corythus. And at this time, he hears his name called. He recognizes the voice, and it is Orn Kai. Okay.
He was looking for inspiration and found an annoying dragging.
Yes. Yeah.
I need to find something to do. Hey, remember me, Estinian? Ah, crap.
Well, if you are a Dragoon main and you didn't skip the cutscenes, then you would know about Orn Kai because the 4.0 Dragoon quest dealt with Estinian and Orn Kai going over to the Far East. And of course, it talks about that previous journey. And he actually has his little young wyvern there. I kind of thought of, oh, it's like a Final Fantasy XI Dragoon's dream.
Yeah, that's probably partially why they did it. If we're being honest with ourselves,
and
right?
There's even that line in there too where it talks about like how he's a dragon slayer, but he's like hanging out with this wyvern and like a in Kugane, and it's like, okay.
So, having not been satisfied with their first journey to the Far East, Orn Kai wants Estinian to accompany him yet again over to the Far East. And as you had mentioned, he responds by saying like, "Hey, I don't want to do this." He actually kind of says, "I don't want to play the nursemaid." But then Orn Kai asks like how old Estinian is, and he says like, "Well, I'm like 10 times your age, so I would be playing the part of the nursemaid." And you know, it was getting on Estinian's nerves, and I think like even just using the word "triggered" would be like a good way to describe how frustrated Estinian was getting at this. You know, he pulls out his lance and he points it and he says, "Look, I've completely sworn off the slaying of dragons, but I might make an exception for you because you're just super annoying at this point." But seeing that fire for the dragons is still there, Orn Kai gets excited because this adventure to the Far East was to chase after Siryu. And so, okay. Orn Kai actually heard that Siryu was a dragon.
It's another 11 thing, right? It's like, Siryu must be a dragon.
It's got it in the name.
Yep. And so, okay, so Estinian kind of reluctantly travels along with him. Yeah, you know, we get the sense like he doesn't really want to do this. You know, he's got better things to do. Walk around the snow, fight some Garleans. So there's this long journey they take there, and of course they can't do like we do and just teleport, you know, for 999 gil. They got to take.
But why?
They got to take the boat.
They've even already been there. Like they should have attuned.
Well, maybe they forgot. I don't know.
Dumb.
He like gets on the boat and like right as it pulls out of port from his first trip, he's like, "Ah, crap." This is gonna cost me later, isn't it?
Big mistake.
So they eventually learn, to their disappointment, that Siryu was not a dragon, but actually a serpent. And also, unfortunately, this long journey had depleted their coin purses. So now he is frustrated, he's tired, he's poor, and he's hungry. That's a nice recipe for depression, let's put it that way. And then they get noticed by this woman in Kugane. We don't learn her name, but she is the proprietor at the hostelry, and she offers both Estinian and Orn Kai room and board if they work there as kind of like this sideshow attraction, because she believes that dragons are bringer of good fortune, and we know Estinian does not believe that dragons are bringers of good fortune. He's like the living embodiment of the bad fortune. So now he's stuck, he's poor, he's frustrated, and he's not doing what he wants to do, and
and he's part of a two-man show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting.
Do you know who I am?
Yeah.
I see this and I think of like, man, like all those images from like the Shanghai Fan Fest are really cool. You know how they could top that in Vegas? Get a guy dressed up as Stinian with a wyvern that's like a blowtorch, and he's like just has like a squid stand.
Right.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably some of the most mundane imagery we have out of all 4 of these stories. I mean, Estinian's narrative is really, it seems just kind of this little comical journey that he does.
Yeah.
And yet it's very interesting because I think it touches base on where we've been, in a sense. The idea that we have this character who was iconic for everything that happened back with our first expansion in Heavensward, and the idea of the world that we've already visited still being a place that exists kind of feels solidified with this story. Like, we're getting information about the fact that tensions might still be there between, you know, the dragons and Ishgard, but they are working together in a lot of ways. There's a new mentality, and that perspective is also mingling in this sort of multicultural exchange that they're having with all the stuff in the East. And it does give you this groundwork for, you know, we're not forgetting about everything that's come before. We're going to keep paying attention to it in a way that the other stories don't have.
Mm-hmm.
It's also kind of fun because brain fart. Yep.
I agree. Those are entertaining.
That happened to you earlier. Yeah. You did this to me. No, God, it was so related. Oh, we are usually the ones running around doing the mundane crap for other people, right? Well, now somebody else gets a turn. You don't like it very much, do you?
It's funny because like I mean, you know, as a dragoon, right? I really liked Estinian as a character, and like this whole story was way more like comical than I was expecting, and so it's like really weird. Like part of me is like don't go full Hildebrand. Like what are you doing?
This is my serious character. Please don't make him funny.
Well, it's like I don't think it did go full Hildebrand.
No, definitely not.
You know,
no. They just wrote the story. They're like, how can we mess with Estinian?
But it's believable, I think. Yeah. he responds in this story exactly how we would expect him to respond. So, especially when we have 2 familiar females that eventually find him and Ornkai, and they are Lalafell females of Tataru and Kryl. Okay? And they approach Estinian, and Tataru greets him saying, "There you are." You know, you kind of get the sense that she had been looking for him for a long time. Of course, she is run out of Scion friends. They're all, you know, in the little room, the side room there in Mordona. So she needs some friends. She needs some people to help her out.
Having too much fun in the Far East. Can't go home. Way cuter outfit, nicer hairdo. Just stay there.
Yep.
And Estinian at this point is thinking like, okay, I'm not about to get caught up in another bothersome adventure. So he's just like, see you later, peace, deuces, and he just like he takes a sack. And he just like jumps up, and the local crowd is just like, you know,
good show, wonderful.
Yeah, and he's just like, I'm out of here, and he dips.
He like looks at Tataru, to Ornkai. He's like, you know what? No.
A bite.
Yeah, I mean, he just. Do you ever do those trials where you wipe 2 or 3 times and you got that one person that's just like, I'm out of here, and he just leaves? Like that. That's how I feel that this was. He leaves, and everyone's like, oh, now we got.
Well, at least attempts were made. This is like getting steps of faith back in like 3 point whatever, and you're just you know what? I'm gone right now. I'm not even gonna.
Is that a pun? Steps of Fate? Estinian? Okay.
Related.
Okay. Okay. So what he underestimated, though, was the persistence of Kryl and Tataru, and I'm not surprised, especially thinking of Kryl. And so it's this ongoing story of, okay, he's going to go cross this bridge, and then the 2 Lalafells find him, and he's like, nope, I'm not doing this, and he leaves, and then he goes to the top of Kugane Castle, and they find him, and he's like, no, and it's like, he just keep this back and forth of like, I don't want to deal with this, and then eventually he's like, okay, there's this boat that's about to leave, I'm going to wait for it, and before this happens, they catch up with them one more time, And at this point, this is where Kryl she kind of like stumbles and falls down on one knee, and she kind of like holds her head, and it's as if she's having this echo vision of his past. And of course, we know that he has a very colorful and dark and not dark, dark past. And so he sees this and he realizes, oh well, the Warrior of Light, has the echo power. Maybe Kryl does too. And so he kind of stops and he wants to know what it is that she saw. And so she's reluctant to say it, but she like apologizes. She feels bad. She's like, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't know that things are this bad with you. Okay, he feels like, okay, maybe they're coming to me, they're approaching me because they have a reason. And of course, we know this reason is that there's Black Rose that's out there, and the two of them basically commission and charge him with going to these Garlean facilities and getting rid of them, which is what he wanted to do at the beginning of the story. He wanted to return to the battlefield at Gimlet Dark and fight some Garleans. So he's like, yes, I'll do this. I'm tired of running around with this little wyvern. I'm tired of being the circus freak, and I'm tired of running around. Like, he's like, good, I found something I want to do. And he goes. Good for him. Okay, and we're happy he does, because he meets with Gaius, and they're super successful. And I'm super curious to see what's going to happen with them next.
It's going to be the best buddy cop drama we've ever seen.
Right.
Yeah.
Assuming 5.1 doesn't start with Gaius just immediately getting sorted through the chest and dying.
No. They can't do it.
Did anybody else interpret the interaction with Kryl and Estinian more as she's like, oh, I saw a thing in your past, and he's like, don't freaking tell anybody, I'll do what you say? Because that's kind of how I read it.
That whole like section read to me like a horror movie, right? He's like walking around Kugane, and like he turns around and they're just like there.
He tries so hard as a character, and for so long he has been a character that I think hasn't really been able to be involved in the main story because he's such a loner, and everyone loves him.
He doesn't want to be.
Yeah, he doesn't want to, and yet we're seeing more and more that he is getting invested, and this kind of feels like a setup for stuff in the patches. I hope we get to see a lot more of him, and maybe he'll even play a role in some of the stuff coming up with the new X-Pack down the way. Because it seems kind of like let's just get him here, connect him with these people, and then fill in the blanks and put a little bit of humor in there to sort of contrast.
Yeah, it's I think it's one of those designs, right, with Shadowbringers, is so many of the main characters that we've interacted with are now not on the same world as that we've been on, and so they have to kind of pull these other characters right out of the woodwork a little bit. Like, hey, you were around for a little bit. Let's shine the spotlight on you a little bit. Let's develop you a little bit more.
Second string, step up.
Yeah. And so that's what we're getting with Estinian. They brought Gaius back because who else is left that they could really like? There's Emmerich, I guess, but he's he's a little busy with Ishgard.
Yeah,
we don't really have a lot of main scenario fighters, right? I mean, we do have there's some we could Gaia Pirates, which the next story actually talks about a little bit. There's a drop from that. But yeah, like that's as far as like people we can rely on the source now to kick some ass and take names. Like Estinian and Gaius are really the only people that we have. So
we got our buddy over in the Far East.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're busy. They're busy doing their things, though, right?
All the people in the steppe, though, like you're kind of their boss a little bit. Like, hey, you giant culture of warriors, I need to borrow you for a second.
I mean,
it's interesting too, though, because I think those characters, at least on the steppe, they are also leading a people, right? So they have to sort of be there for the day-to-day and make sure that their, tribes can actually survive and flourish. Whereas we have these other figures that are really interesting perspectives. I mean, especially Gaius, the fact that he's coming back to deal with the empire he was once a part of the system of, which is a perspective that we don't necessarily have outside of like Sid and, a few of those other characters that we get. So having this, once enemy turned ally is a really kind of interesting pivot. And the same kind of goes, they kind of match because Estinian also is kind of like that. He was an antagonistic force for a long time.
Straight up fight him in 1.0? Don't you?
Oh, I don't know.
You fight him in the Realm Reborn Dragoon quest.
Okay.
There's there's a brief period where you fight him, but it's dragon eyes and power and things don't always work the way you want them to.
So grumpy, such a grumpy man.
Well, grumpy boy.
Let's not forget we still have Hien and Yugiri, okay, and they're not minor characters. So
that's true. That's true.
I mean, come on, we also have Lise. You know, I mean, they all are.
She's kind of in charge of Alamigo.
I know they're all doing things, but you could see that they can be reallocated. You know.
Yeah.
I would love to see more of Yugiri. I feel like they'll probably hold off on Lise for a while, just because she was the focus of a lot of Stormblood. She's had the spotlight.
Yeah.
So, but Yugiri is a character that I think is amazing, but we just don't often, get to really, really focus her. Since she was introduced, because a lot of it had to do with Hien and the step and or the Domin arc that kind of happened. So yeah, I think it'd be cool to see more of her for sure.
We were most focused on her when we couldn't see her face. Did you guys? This is semi-related, and if you haven't seen it, I'm gonna have to find it for you. There is a picture of Estinian that somebody's drawn like this in a corner, and Kryl and Tataru like this, keeping him in the corner, and it's adorable. Have you guys not seen this? I gotta find this for you.
I haven't seen it, but that sounds pretty good.
It's amazing, quite honestly. Also, get ready for a bad joke. Brings a new meaning to the words drag her.
Oh no.
Oh boy. Well,
not ashamed of that one.
I see. In the chat, Moon Priscilla mentioned Arnvald and Fordola, and I think those are really good points. Fordola we've seen developed, and I think Fordola has a big role to play in what's going to be happening, especially with the artificial echo and all of these different components to the Garlean machinations, that they've been working on.
I feel like with that being the case, probably like a 5.4. For that is when because we're gonna have to at some point, right at this point, I think 6.0 is probably Garlemald or something completely different, but we still need to really finish up Garlemald, even if we're not going to go there. And they got to bring Fordola in. They got to Xenos, obviously same thing, right? There's some stuff going on there with that artificial echo, and so they need to address that. Fordola did have a story like these Tales of the Shadows in that Chronicles of Light book, which I still haven't read, but she is talked about a little bit in there, so that's definitely for people that are like, what happened to Fordola? Go check that out.
Speaking of stories to wrap up,
yeah.
I'm just looking at all that we still got to do. Oh my goodness. Okay,
there's so much to discuss.
It's fine.
They could have ended the story there. I'm sorry.
This is fine. We got plenty of time.
But they, after Estinian leaves, you can see that Tataru and Kryl are still there. They're back eating with Orin Kai, and Tataru asks Kryl about that particular echo vision that she had of Estinian, and then Kryl kind of responds with a sarcastic comment saying, whatever gave you the impression I saw such a thing? And, I just kind of concluded that Estinian had been played, but we all know that the ends justify the means, and I think that's why the title of the story was given as it is, which is Echoes of Delusion, because she really didn't see the echo. She faked it.
Mm-hmm.
She faked
or she did see some stuff, and it was just Estinian in his room in Ishgard with a bunch of like Tataru posters from her modeling attempts. And it's like, you don't need to know about this. I'm doing you a favor.
How did your brain even come up with that?
I mean, she you remember back, like we were talking about the mining earlier, right? Tataru mining, and she was always trying something new to make money. Maybe she had a stint where she was trying a modeling gig for a week.
I think I might be
she seems so pure for
that. She's so good.
It's all high fashion.
All right.
Okay.
There's the
Anything
picture
else
for the.
You wanna add to that story?
No.
Well, yes, I have linked in the chat for the listeners, the current listeners, that picture I was talking about, and now I'm gonna throw it at you guys.
Okay.
Just for a cute little thing.
I feel so bad.
Look at him.
He's just like, leave me alone.
So
There's a gap though, right in the middle. He could squeeze. I mean, he could just jump.
He could jump, but they've wore him down at this point, right? It's so cute. Anyway,
you could get out of that.
That's
if you really wanted to. If you really wanted to, you could get out of that.
Now he has to give up.
Or Estinian. Okay. I actually think the next two stories are just super cool. I think they really add a lot, because this next story here, it's interesting. It's a little bit of a paradox, because it gives the story of kind of what happened, in the Crystal Exarch's timeline, where the 8th Umbral Calamity actually took place, that led to him being freed from the Crystal Tower. But it didn't take place for us because we've changed history. So it happened, but it didn't happen. In that sense.
Everybody's starving for that information, right? Everybody's so how do we get there? Here it is.
Well, it's just interesting. We gotta, if this is how they're going to play the time travel thing and the different timelines, it seems possible that you can now have 2 parallel timelines, and both can be true, but they're true depending on which person has experienced them. So we got to be able to keep that straight in our minds.
We have to take the soul stones back.
Right. Okay, so this actually comes from the perspective of not even an actual person, but from the Omega Minion, which I think is just called OMG.
It's great.
I was so excited about this. I can't even, when I started reading it and I was going, wait a second. Is this Omega? Is this the little minion that's traveling with? I mean, we get in the end 8-man there with Alphascape and all of that series. We get this little glimpse at them, Omega finally realizing that humanity may have something, that there might be something more to them, and that they've adopted this human form, and now they're kind of trying to process this. And then to have them just get obliterated, I was going, no, please be there.
And zero mentions of Alpha in this.
No, he's there.
They mentioned it.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They refer to him as the OMG's perspective of traveling with the small yellow bird, which is really
it talks
good.
about how he gets really sad when someone dies. He's mentioned.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, that's. Yeah. Oh, you know what it was? Okay, I was looking.
I read the story 3 times. I know it's.
I clicked. I'm like, I read it too, and I did. No, I do remember that now. You're right.
But it was just a really interesting thing to kind of have revealed through this. The fact that we didn't really know at the end of that storyline, if you've done that piece of the 8-man and done all the story with that, we had no idea if the sentience that was Omega had been actually retained, or if there was just this little mindless robot that was going around. And
it had to be, right? It had to be.
I mean, we hoped, but we didn't know. And now, having seen that the Crystal Tower played a role in so many events down the road, it makes me wonder if there is going to be more about Omega or Midgardstormer or all these different things.
It has to be.
Oh.
Yeah, those are. People assume that there's only 14 shards, but that's not true. We still have
Well, we don't know. We don't know how far that goes out. I mean, because the shards are also kind of alternate dimensions and not technically it's a weird thing, right? We don't know how that extends.
Yeah,
I mean, because
we know that space is much bigger than kind of what we generally assume. But anyway, that's all speculation at this point.
Yeah. Well, we had asked Koji about that. When was that? FanFest.
Mm-hmm. It's going to end up looking very much like the Zelda timeline when it's all said and done.
Keep going. Let me actually find the quote here.
Okay. So while you're doing that, so the interesting thing is that I'm just going to call him Omega, even though it's OMG. Okay. So in this story, he is recalling all the events from the 8th Umbral Calamity as he is observing Sid, Garland, and the Ironworks crew as they try to rebuild everything and ultimately get to the point to where they, unlock, the Crystal Tower and deal with the interdimensional rift and, everything that's involved with that, Alexander. So after the events of the Gimlet Dark, the Alliance, we know, had the upper hand in the engagement. And at this point, Sid, Nero, and the Ironworks crew, they went to the Burn in order to fortify Siryu's wall in preparation for a possible Garlean counterattack, like a military counterattack, with airships and stuff. However, the attack that the Garleans eventually used was not machinery in warfare, in that sense. They were actually deploying the Black Rose. And so Sid sadly figures this out because he tries to contact his friends in Alamigo, and there's no response because they had all been annihilated by
That's
the Black
the point
Rose.
in time where you're kind of like, what?
Well, I mean, this got dark really quick.
This is not us anymore, is it?
Yeah.
We liberated you. There's hundreds of people living here. Nobody can pick up the link. Oh, they're all gone. That's not good.
Well, and here's the thing. It's easy to kind of like hear the story or read the story and to say, oh, okay, well, that's just an interesting story. But the thing is, this actually happened. This happened. And this had to happen in order for, us to eventually be called by the Crystal Exarch, okay? So, I mean, we're talking the destruction of civilizations. And of course, if you're familiar with the geography of Alamigo, it makes sense that when Black Rose was deployed there, that it spread into the Shroud and to Thanalan, and that resulted in a lot of other casualties. And of course, being off over in the Far East, over by the Burn, Sid and Nero and most of the Ironworks people were spared that attack.
I had a funny parallel thought when I was reading this. Not unlike the Wave of Light, it just kind of goes across the continent and like Limsa is left over there by itself, sort of separated.
They're like, yay, we're an island.
Yeah. Thanks, water.
Well, I don't think there was a yay.
Wow.
But I get you. So now, of course, how did Omega and Alpha survive? Well, they were in Ogamoro. Okay. So they were away from where the Black Rose hit the hardest. And Sid tries to reach out to Omega, try to contact him, but Omega can't respond because he can't talk. But he's able to discern all this information. He's able to process it as best that he can. And so it's interesting that this is written from the perspective of Omega, this little automaton minion trying to process everything that's going on. But he's like, I can't talk to Sid. I can't tell him anything. Okay, so
I think it's also interesting that because he is a robot, he doesn't necessarily find this frustrating either. She's like, that's the way it is. Can't talk. And stuff's happening. Yeah, that's what it is.
It's almost better, I think.
I agree. Absolutely.
The big problem with him, I think the big problem with him when you see him in the Raid series is that he claims he's there to observe. He ever does is interfere. And so to then have to go into this sort of perspective where he is strictly observing and then logging this data and processing this data with these new sort of connection points, it gives him, I don't know, kind of a chance to reflect that we don't really get a sense of in any other point with his character.
That's a fun point.
Yeah.
I just like that it's I don't want to say like a blank face like recounting. That's what it is. Yeah. But it's still because of what it is, it's still very, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we get our fill of Omega for the next 2 years, and there we go.
That's all I need after that read, let me tell you.
So the effects of Black Rose were, if you're familiar with it, they halt the flow of ether, and that actually leads to death. That wasn't limited to just people, okay? That also affected plants, it affected animals, and even the land itself. And the story goes and it tells us that this led to the imbalances of the flora and fauna. And so, like, entire societies are falling apart. I mean, organizations just completely broke down, and nations are just abandoned as people are just kind of like seeking refuge from this particular airborne death. And I'm trying to emphasize it because, again, this actually happened. Like, it's not just some sort of fairy tale story that's making up. I mean, it's a big deal. This is a calamity in a very terrifying way.
So the cities, the main cities are abandoned. People, I think they say they are reverting to beastmen type settlements. So
right,
everybody's living in a tent with their tribe.
I don't know. It's funny because there's all these TV shows now and video games of kind of like the post-apocalyptic horror and how people would respond. The Walking Dead and like the Fallout series and that sort of stuff. And it's kind of easy to picture how this kind of stuff would take place. But not even the mighty Garlemald could resist the effects of it, because since Black Rose affected the land, it also affected the ceruleum, which was kind of the staple resource of the daily lives of the Garlean citizens. And so their ceruleum failed to combust, and this means that all of the machinery within the capital city was unable to move and to work. And so that, of course, led to the demise of even that mighty nation, which I'm pretty sure was something that even Emmett Silk had kind of foreseen with all that, because, he knows these things are going to happen. He's the one that kind of introduced them to
be fair, the Ascians have made mistakes before. That's why the Void exists. So this could have just been a mistake. Oh, this will help to push stuff along. It wouldn't we form the light world back into the source.
I mean, they know a lot. They're not all knowing, right? It's like when the Exarch came with the Crystal Tower, and it's like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. That's a thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just speculating at this point, but Emmett Silk has basically kind of shown that he doesn't really care what happens to the Garlean Empire with his ultimate plans. Like, okay, he cannot name a successor. He doesn't care if it brings it into chaos. He just doesn't care about that kind of stuff.
That's a bonus.
So
yeah, I mean, and he has a complete disregard for life forms as we know them, right? The idea that, if all these people die, it's nothing because those aren't his people. They're not the people he's trying to save. They're not even real people in his mind. And it's easy to look at that and think this is so callous, but when you consider just the context of the world he came from, and the fact that essentially all of the people that we know of in the world, to him are just kind of like a weird magical side effect split illusion. And he's just kind of going, well, if we get rid of all of this, it doesn't even matter. They're not real anyway, And it's kind of terrifying because I think the Ascians don't really give thought to those sorts of things. So mistake or negligence, they could have just been like, this in consequences, but does it actually matter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're very selfish. Of course, you have to ask yourself, like, if you were in their shoes, would you do the same
exactly.
thing? But
they are selfish. So are we.
Yeah.
Yep.
I want my people back. I want to live. Battle begins.
As you said, that kind of humanity fell into this dehumanizing process. Their behavior was so bad. The Ironworks crew, I'm just going to call them that, they tried to, remain above that and try to remain cordial. They tried to end a lot of the conflicts. They were unsuccessful with that. They even offered food and safe haven to those who were exploited, and they even tried to hunt down those who were perpetrators. This led to some people kind of rallying to their cause. I mean, they try to play the good guys, the moral people in the midst of all of this chaos. Okay, I get that. They're remaining kind of the only normal sense of society when everything is just on fire. So, unfortunately,
if you think about it, it's sadly reminiscent of people today. Oh, we're screwing up our planet. Won't be alive then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Ironworks are the activists that are like, but that matters. It still matters.
Climate control, climate change.
Just putting that out there.
Oh, man.
Did I blow your mind a little bit?
Well, I'm just like, oh, man, the rabbit trails we can go down. Okay. All right. Focus. Okay, all right, I got to do this. All right. See what you did there? Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. Now I got to transition to something sad, because unfortunately, our little Lalafell Ironworks buddy Wedge became a casualty. I mean, he was just mauled by one of the beasts. And you get this scene to where, like, he's at his bedside. They try to treat him. They're unsuccessful. His vitals are fading. And his final wish is for his Regaden friend, Biggs, to go on living and to start a family in order that his legacy would continue. And, of course, we know that the legacy of Biggs was really important. And he replied to his dying Lalafell buddy that he should do likewise. And then, like, this is a sad note that Wedge kind of responds, and he says, like, quote unquote, sorry, no one will ever compare to her. And he's talking about Tataru. So looking at Xenedra to see like how many tears.
Oh man, no, that was honestly, even though it was told from such like a blank perspective, this one has the most tears for me because they don't. Never at any point does he name anyone except for Sid and Nero. Everybody else, you kind of have to figure it out. So you're doing the whole like, no, it's not them. No, it's not them. Oh, it is them. You know, the whole time.
The reveals are really good, and I think it is. It's more impactful then because it kind of engages in the moment in this way where you're thinking through it, but you're also trying to sort of, I don't know, unravel this event that we will never see. And because of that, you end up with these kind of stakes in it as you're trying to pick apart all these different details. And it hits harder when you realize, oh my gosh, I've lost these people.
No, little Wedge. No.
Yeah.
Oh, Tataru died at some point. No.
Yeah. Well, it's you have to do that from a storytelling perspective. You can't just sit there and say, lots of people died, lots of people died. It only hits home when it's someone that's close to you. When it's someone you care about. Okay.
No.
And it's someone you care about talking about someone that he cares about. So
Extra tears.
Yeah. So there's a lengthy time of mourning, that's obvious. And kind of Sid and the Ironworks gang, they basically conclude that, okay, that we got to restore this world, but they realize that, you know what, we don't have the means to do this. We're physically unable to fix this dying world. And that's when the story tells us, or from Omega's perspective, that the Garland Ironworks, they find their true purpose. And Sid comes up with this radical idea that the past had to be changed in order for the world to survive. Now, as you know, if someone were to say this today, most people would be like, you're crazy. And that's kind of what happened. A lot of people within the Ironworks did not approve of this. And
even the people who were, still like morally bound, like, no, we should save the world. They're like, okay, buddy.
Yeah. They all walked out stealing office supplies on their way out. They're like, this isn't...
I'm taking this stapler. So, yeah, I mean, they took stuff. And, you know, so Sid is kind of like, he's having to work with other people. He's working with people that are skilled in magic and ethereal science. And then you also get the sense that our character, the Warrior of Light, and it's clear, we did die from the Black Rose. Okay, we weren't killed by the Garleans or by Xenos or battle if Black Rose killed us.
And we learned that during the beginning of 5.0.
Right. Yeah, we do know that.
So Oriente wasn't totally lying.
Yeah. Is he ever totally ever telling the truth though? Let's be honest.
I'm never gonna believe anything he ever tells me ever again.
That's what makes him a good character though. It's because we learn new things from him. I like him for that. But anyway, you know, our character, the Warrior of Light, we were so influential on all of these people, and the lasting impression of us kind of got the plan shifted from trying to rewrite history to actually saving the Warrior of Light. And I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, that's good. All of those silly side quests that I did for experience, it's like all those NPCs that have no name, like Gridanian guard, like we influenced all those people, and now they're like, oh, we remember the stories and this is reflected upon.
It's kind of touching that if they'd have phrased it, we want to go back to save the world, people are like, we screwed up. It's something we can do. But if it's like, we're going to go back and save the Warrior of Light, they're like, you know what? I want to do that. Yeah, you're right.
I prefer this marketing campaign over the other one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so weird that it's like, Warrior of Light worlds.
I mean, when you think about it, I think people latch onto individuals. Like when you think,
absolutely.
What has the world ever done for me? There's this sort of cynicism, the world doesn't care. The world isn't the kind of thing that has its own, sentience or one opinion. And I think people kind of can oppose that idea. Whereas if you say, what has the Warrior of Light done for me? Then it's a very personal thing. And that kind of gives you this connection where you're going, if I could do anything in these last hours to pay back what was given to me, why not? You know, why not? That's something that is still giving me hope even in this dark time.
It's really interesting because, like, I can't say I've ever been in a situation like these NPCs have, right? But you can still sort of put yourself in their place. And at least for me personally, I completely understand that mindset, and I don't understand why. Like, I appreciate being able to live on a planet. That's pretty cool. But you're right. When it's that individual, it gives you that drive you just don't have otherwise. Somebody you know, somebody you love. It's really kind of a cool thing to think about, I guess.
Warrior of Light killed 3 field mice for me, and I only gave him 200 gil. I feel like I owe him a little bit.
Right.
Let's see what we can do here.
Payback. Canonical payback. Okay. So this leads, like, even these small local settlements to donate to the cause of the ironworks, and the story mentions that they give sacrificially. I mean, they give out of not their excess, but what they have to survive.
No one has access.
Yeah. Well, maybe they probably don't have much of it. And then one of those persons that was donating was a Namazu, and he reported these visions from the big one. And if you ever did the Namazu side quest, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
I found this is really, really interesting because in the visions that he got, he says that the world did not look the way that it did currently. And that tells us that his visions actually depicted a time when the 8th umbral calamity never occurred. And it's interesting that his visions envisioned actually the success of the 5.0 main story. And we thought that these silly fish Namazu were like, they were nothing, they were silly, and I thought that they were like, I don't know, whatever.
They're still silly.
Well, it's like those are real. Those are real visions. Like, I thought, oh, what are you guys smoking? Like, what, you guys are just silly. But I mean,
it's the tea, man.
Yeah, it's something. It's something that's going. I don't know what the world are drinking, but I don't know. It kind of like it made them worthwhile, and it's just a nice way to kind of like, hey, let's kind of plug them in here in a way that's not just kind of sprinkling them in, but kind of put them in a really impactful way. So, kind of. If you haven't done the Namazu side quest, then obviously you're not interested in crafting and gathering leveling, but you should go do them anyway.
Oh, they're so good.
They're pretty funny.
They're so good.
They're hilarious.
Plus, it'll get you ready for the Ishgardian thing coming up, right?
That's right.
That's
right. Okay, and we all need to help with that because that's how we get Ishgardian housing. Everyone needs to do their part. Okay?
Theoretically. And it's world by world. Yeah, so help your world, not just your Warrior of Light.
Right.
Full circle.
Help everybody. And then you could respond appropriately and say, hey, what has the world done for me? Anyway, okay.
Got you Ishgard housing. That's important.
There you go. Yeah, got you. Okay, yeah, that's no small feat. Okay.
We get a bonus Tales from the Shadows, and it's just, what has the world ever done for me? Ishgardian housing. Oh, cool. No, yeah, we'll help.
Yeah, totally.
No, I love that house. Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so it's neat because they plug in a lot of other side characters in this about how they help the various Ironworks crew. We actually see that one of the transport vessels from the Ironworks gets ambushed, but they get rescued by an airship captain who was the daughter of Radlia, and she was kind of the blonde back in the 24-man quest that unlocked the Void Arc. I know it was like years ago, but we actually see
Void Arc.
Her daughter.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was the first 24-man in the Mock series. Okay. I like those. Okay. We also hear about a turtle in the Ruby Sea, and that's our new quote-unquote Genbu, which is Sorbonne, most likely. They mention a white dragon. We know who that is. That's no doubt Racefelger. So he's just like, I don't want to have anything to do with all this. I'm going to fly away from all of this nonsense. And that's exactly what he would do.
Wait, didn't he ask if people were still beating each other up, basically? No?
Something like that.
I think he does. He asked about the chaos.
Yeah.
I assume is probably a test of whether or not he thinks people have changed, right? Mm-hmm. Because we know he's still holding on to that. thorn in his side from the conflict.
And people have become worse. People backslid during this. So
yeah.
Is it safe to fly down? No.
Yeah.
No.
He knows
Stay
better.
Home.
Yeah.
Okay. So unfortunately, we also see the end of Cid's life, and this is something that Omega witnesses. And at the time of Cid's death, one tier, even Nero is still alive. And he's still doing his kind of like sarcastic things that he's done. They share some coffee from their boil master. But you kind of get the sense that Nero has definitely changed. He's no longer, the competitor of Cid like he is when you spam main story roulette over and over and over again for leveling. He respects Cid as a colleague. And I swear, like, Nero is Vegeta. That's exactly who he is. He's gone from the competitor to the colleague.
Walking around in his pink Batman shirt, just making remarks at
Please,
Cid.
thank you.
So. I'm not gonna lie. You've been talking about all of your tears that you've shed. Out of everything, this one got me because you get so used to these loops of just character behavior, and we see this all the time. This sort of playful antagonism between them. Is Nero or isn't he actually on our side? Is he going to betray us at some point? And when I got to this point in this story, I think it really hit home for me. Oh my gosh, something different has happened. Like something really terrible has happened. And they've come through this. And the one bright point is the fact that through all these terrible calamities, they've found, I think, that place of trust and respect for each other again. And I was a mess. I'm sitting there just like, oh my God. They're friends now, and they're gonna die in like 2 seconds. Oh, but it was so good. It's such a good resolution for the two of them. But it makes me wonder: is he actually going to go that way without this kind of calamity? We don't know.
Exactly. That was my thought as well. Like, if the world doesn't get totally screwed, is he still going to stay a jerk?
Yeah. He's a good jerk, though. Like,
at least he'll make us fancy armor and stuff.
Yeah. So then the story kind of ends. It's like, okay, they investigate into the Crystal Tower, into the Primal Alexander, and the Interdimensional Rift. We knew all this stuff if you didn't skip your cutscenes unlocking the twinning. And then Omega notes that all three of these, I thought this was interesting, the Crystal Tower, Alexander, and the Interdimensional Rift story, have one thing in common. They each involve a key character entering into a self-imposed exile. And there's some of these are clearer to kind of define than others, but I don't know, it's kind of an interesting point that from his perspective, as he's trying to catalog everything that's going on, that stood out to him.
I think
foreshadowing.
Yeah, maybe some foreshadowing. One, I mean, there's also the idea of somebody making a great sacrifice in order to make way for a better future, and sometimes that sacrifice is this exile. But it's funny that note really stood out to you, Bill, because what really stood out to me in that last bit was his realization about hope, and the fact that, like we were saying, the whole time he's kind of this neutral observer, and he doesn't really have an opinion. He doesn't even give names to people. He's just observing. Right. They are just observing. They're just a part of almost the documentation process of all of this. And then at the end of all of this, to say, I have been affected by what happened. I realize not just what they call hope, but I realize what hope is for myself, was so powerful. It was almost bewildering to have that moment and then have it taken away. And again, it makes me wonder, I mean, if we kind of look back at the timeline, Omega should, in theory, still be a consciousness that exists, because it's not like the reset of time goes so far back that it would change what happened at the end of the actual raid itself. So again, what role could Omega play in a future if we know it's possible for Omega to have a human reaction or a human emotion?
Well, we know in O12S, it was, in order to understand your strengths, I must understand your weaknesses. And that's when he does Omega male and female. So we know that he's already made the transition to try to understand humanity and their strengths and the hope that kind of pushes them. But yeah, I think you brought up a really good point that I probably should have emphasized. I appreciate you saying that.
Do you think that each Omega can talk to other Omegas. Because he does span different dimensions to pick up different people that you fight and stuff.
That would be fascinating.
What if our Omega learns what other Omega learns, and then that bit of self-sacrifice thing is what he does?
Well, here's the other question to think about, right? Because this is the alternate timeline, right? Mm-hmm. Are we going to go back to that at all, or is this it?
Well, yeah. Also, at the end of what I guess Heavensward, yes, we unleash Omega to try and stop the crap that's happening. So it would be kind of an interesting end to Omega to be like, hey. Well, or even if they take the initiative themselves, like they were a thing we were trying to use to save everybody, and then at the end of this expansion, they are a thing that has become a person unto themselves that decide to make that decision to save everybody for themselves. It'd be kind of an interesting cycle.
I love that. I didn't even think about that, Xenedra. That would be such a cool way to sort of push forward that story. And also the fact that maybe... because I had trouble understanding why that was focused. So why does Omega make that observation that they've gone into this self-imposed exile? But when you think about it, Omega's kind of in a outside imposed exile because of its actions, and the idea of seeing people who do this out of sacrifice or to help the world, and then maybe having this realization about hope or the future could lead to something down the road where maybe Omega starts to see itself not as this antagonistic force working against mortal peoples, but as a force that could, I don't know, somehow help them or be relevant to them.
In the chat, we've had there could be 2 Omegas in the same timeline if Omega's in the twinning in that crystal tower. Like, that thing bops around.
True.
So they just have like a little tiny Omega high five, transfer the info, and he's like, oh, dude, I got stuff to do.
Yeah. Well, we know Omega came to the source because he was searching for Midgar Stormer. That was the purpose. And he got injured by doing that. And so I don't know. There's more we could talk about that, I guess. Yeah. There's more. I have some maybe slightly different opinions on the matter, but that's not the time or the place. So no pun intended.
Add it to the list. Haha, Tyler.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, that's
there we go.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else you all wanted to comment on with the Omega story?
Approximately 4.5 tiers.
Okay. Okay. You guys can't see it on the podcast, but Fusion is just bawling his eyes out right now. So
crying so hard.
Okay. All right. So on to the final story, which is called Through His Eyes, and it is through the eyes of Emmett Selk. Man, I feel like I learned more from this story than I learned from the other 3, maybe even the other 3 combined. So fascinating, and I hope that it allows Emmett Selk to continue to somewhat be a character in the story. Like, I know he's dead. I get that. He's gone. But that doesn't mean that
people die and don't die all the time in the story.
I mean, you know, echo visions and stuff like that, or stuff that happened, you know, prior to the Sundering. So, okay. So it's called Through His Eyes, and it gives 2 different stories, 2 different glimpses of reality, you might say, through Emmett Selk's eyes. One of them before the events that we witness in the Amarot dungeon, and one of them before the 7th Umbral Calamity. Okay, so this actually gives us a lot of information as to what life and civilization was like on the source before, you know, things went crazy. Okay, so it's, for those people that are interested in that, here's your chance. You get good stuff here. It's all brand new. Okay. It's interesting that Emmett Selk, he's able to actually look and see like the ether that's just kind of like, I'm like looking up in the air, like no one can see me do that, but he can see the ether that's there. And in the first story, which is before what happened in the Amarot dungeon, he sees it and he comments that it's just bright, it's beautiful. But then the Aether, after 6 calamities worth of rejoining, it's like, it's sickly, it's like a candle that's almost about to be, you know, be blown out. There's a huge difference, and like he gets disgusted by that. He is frustrated at that. Like he doesn't like that. So that's something we can't see. We can't see the ether like he does. So it's kind of another way of seeing things through his eyes. Okay, so the first tale begins before we have Zodiark and Hydaelyn summoned. Okay, so just kind of keep that timeline straight in your mind here. Emmett is kind of like, he's out in the grass. He's just kind of like, you know, lying down, and he is congratulated, you know, for his newly acquired title as the Honorable Emmett Selk of the Convocation of the 14 by our buddy Himladeus. Okay, so that's so we know that the meeting of the 14 to deal with you know, their problems that ultimately led to the summoning of Zodiark, that hasn't taken place yet, but it's close. Okay, he's just received his title. And we also learn a little bit of what they call the underworld. Okay, now we have known of the underworld as what we call it the life stream. Okay, it's kind of where souls go when they depart from their bodies, you know, upon death. Okay, but they call it the underworld, and apparently that was the original designation. It was known as the underworld before that. Okay, and of course the connection with Hades is obvious. Because the Greek word Hades denotes actually the realm of the dead in some ancient Greek and Jewish cultic practices. Actually, modern Greeks would pronounce it as Abis instead of Hades, alpha, delta, eta, sigma. Just nerding out there a little bit. Okay. I think it's actually interesting that since we have the realm of the dead, that actually it confirms that death was taking place before the first calamity. Okay, so even though he talks about how, oh, we're immortal and everyone was immortal, death was just a natural thing. People would die, souls would go down to the underworld, and then souls would come back and they would reconstitute new life. But that was just a normal, regular thing. I didn't know that, and maybe I just missed it, but I thought that was kind of fascinating. It wasn't like this perfect utopia where there was no death and then death kind of entered in. No, it's just kind of normal. I don't know. What do you all think of that?
I mean, yeah. I mean that I don't think we had any hints that, or I don't think the game ever told us like, yeah, they're all immortal and it's just great. It's just we had this idea that they were on this planet, and we knew that there were other civilizations as well. They hinted at that a little bit, but we had, you know. It could have just been life as usual, you know. I mean, they had society a little figured out more. You know, they weren't, you know, they were all kind of like prim and proper. And if we have issues, let's rent a debate room and go talk about it. You know, like. But yeah, I thought it was interesting.
We knew was that they were long lived.
Yeah,
you know, like theoretically 14 times longer than us.
Yeah, I mean, Emmett seems to, and this is where I think some of this confusion comes from, he seems to refer to the fact that there is, for him at least, this massive division between the way that mortals as we know them now either succumb to illness or die, their weak flesh, their mortal flesh, all these different kinds of things that they're, you know, kind of people just drifting by that vanish or die to really inconsequential things, versus whatever the Ascians or the people of Almarant used to have. So it makes me wonder what that differentiation was. If death happened, was it something that was chosen? Was it something where a physical body wore down? Or was it that what was different that gave them immortality was that their souls were still intact and could be retrieved from the life stream, and that same consciousness could continue to exist? There's still a lot of questions, but this does confirm, it seems, that people do return to some kind of source, that they do die in a sense, even in this ancient society.
I think we actually get an answer to one of those questions you asked, because when we learn about the Phoenix, you get the impression that it was someone who died, but they really didn't want to die. It was like a soul that didn't want to go to the underworld. It was reluctant on doing that. So, but I mean, I think you're right. Like, there's just a lot of speculation, and I hope we learn more about, you know, the origins of our cosmology.
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, as we said, right, like Emmett Selk he's gone, but we still have this giant city at the bottom of the ocean, that might have something to explore, or maybe we'll get another dungeon, or maybe we'll go back for a couple MSQ
with the word cosmos in it.
We still have Elidibus. I mean, we still have someone who was alive at that point. We still, I mean.
Well, I mean, all of that to be said, we also have our protagonist, which we'll get to hear more in this discussion. But as we continue to, I mean, possibly absorb our pieces of ourself, I guess you could say, will we remember things? Will we almost start to remember back through this timeline? I have no idea. But it could be really fascinating if we get to explore that in future X packs as well.
It'd be interesting because, going back to like 1.0 and ARR, there's been that idea of like, oh, Gaius was right, the primals are bad and we need to stop them and all this stuff. And now we're gonna be like, oh yeah, no, the Ascians were totally right this whole time. And I can remember, going on long walks in Amarot with this person that was probably my significant other. And yeah, let's just rejoin. Let's just do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're probably gonna have to pick at the end, right?
That would be amazing.
Like
the final choice of Final Fantasy XIV. Yeah. Do you do the rejoining or not?
Yeah.
I'm operating under the hypothesis that actually everything that Emmett Silk has told us is true.
I believe that, honestly. Yeah. I don't think that Emmett is a liar. I think that it's just that his truth, or his version of the truth, is his perspective, and what he tells us or doesn't tell us. I mean, what he's told other people could very much be lies, but it seems like everything we've heard from him has been a truth, whether it's his perspective or not, Well,
that's the way it is for all of us. Like everything we tell is, hopefully the truth from our own perspective. And certainly we were led to believe some things from Heidelin's perspective of the truth. She might not have been as forthcoming.
Created beings aren't perfect.
Yeah. Good point. Okay. So not only do we get in this story some interesting backstory of Emmett Silk, we also learn about Hythlodaeus, okay? We learn that he is the chief of the Bureau of the Architect, okay? His parents must be very proud, okay? And so he approaches Emmett Silk and he congratulates him while he's on the lawn. But I think it's interesting, Emmett actually reminds Hythlodaeus that he turned down the honor of being on that board of 14. And I think this is really huge because actually Hythlodaeus could have been one of those 3 unsundered Ascians had he merely taken the opportunity that he just decidedly passed over to Emmett Silk. And so people who are fans of Hythlodaeus, I'm sure, would be very happy that he did defer it to Emmett Silk.
Or he could have kept the 14 from making some choices that maybe Emmett Silk influenced.
Yeah.
There might not be any Ascians at all. Good job, H dude.
I like him.
I do too.
Well, he really operates, I think, as a sense too of what Emmett has lost. The fact that when you actually get to the city, there's all these faceless people, and so for you it feels like a ghost town. But when you sit down and you actually have this discussion with Hythlodaeus and you're going, oh wait, these were people that had friendships and relationships and were close, you can realize I think a little bit more tangibly what Emmett is fighting for.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
Yeah.
We learn that both Emmett and Hythlodaeus are able to see and discern the underworld. They both are able to see the ether. So he's not just like a minor NPC. I mean, he's still a very talented Amarotine, I guess you could say. I don't necessarily want to call him an Ascian, but I'll just call him
ancient.
An ancient. There you go. Okay. Okay. Now he held the highest office of the Bureau of the Architect, which was that institution that oversaw the creation of concepts. This next point, super interesting. Okay. Hythlodaeus asked Emmett Silk if he has informed, quote, a certain someone who is our friend of Emmett Silk's recent promotion. Okay. Now, the prevailing theory that's out there, which I think is almost certainly true, is that the Warrior of Light, our character, was that one person of the 14 who was the dissenter at the idea of summoning Zodiark. Okay. Now, in the French version of this story that's online, okay, you actually have to toggle on the screen your gender as the Warrior of Light, and your choice that you make is reflected on the gender of this word, our friend. So that practically confirms this theory, in my opinion. I mean, we are the friend that is being referred to in this. Okay,
that's whether we are that one.
Yeah, well, it's. I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
You got to know that. So, I think some people speculated on that, and that's definitely kind of like that's where Yoshi P has been putting that carrot in front of our head to kind of look in that direction. And I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, I would not be surprised that we just, we were formerly friends of Emmett Selk and Hythlodaeus, but due to all the sunderings, we just don't remember this. And this is why at the very end, after we finish the MSQ, Emmett Selk tells us to remember. It's
and why he's hopeful that we can handle stuff, because it means we're closer to the being that we once were.
Right.
And then we're gonna remember, that we killed Emmett, and we're just be like, sorry, buddy.
Whoops.
Like, I didn't recognize you. Why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
That's actually your significant other the whole time. You killed him.
Boy.
Good job.
Oh boy.
Look, I'd be so down. I'm not gonna lie. He's my little Emmett Selk is my little trash baby, and I love him. And I was so glad that we got this story with him, because it is so interesting to get into all of this and what our relationship was with him, and or what we might owe to the Ascians as we know them now going forward, if we do start to remember these things, or if in a future expansion or in our patch content we get the point where we get to actually meet Zodiark, or we get to talk with the Ascians with this new knowledge that we have. That's a totally different conversation than these faceless antagonists that we've had previously. And I think they could do some really cool things there with the possibilities of what we discover.
Well, we're already on our way to talking to Zodiark, I think, because we picked up what we assume is the Oracle of Darkness in the raid.
Right. Yeah. Good point. And Xenos has some plans on this too, and so does Elidibus. So we might get our answers sooner than we think. So I'm looking forward to it. Please look forward to it.
So hungry for this info.
To it.
At no other point in the storyline have I just been like, a tidbit.
As soon as I got to Amrot, I'm just like, give me everything.
Yes.
It's so good. I can't remember a time in an MMO, let alone, even an RPG, that I've had such a just 180 reeling emotion response to something. And when you first crest over that hill and you see the city that's been hidden, and you get all of these truths and those final cutscenes, and then the part is you're getting into that final battle where you merge and you stand up, and he has that moment, and it's one of my favorite Emmett moments, but that moment where he looks at you and for a second he sees what we assume is who we were.
Yeah.
And it's even just talking about it, I get chills, but it is so compelling, and it's opened this door. Even as we've gotten answers to questions, it's opened this door to more answers and more story, as opposed to shutting doors, which is really a cool thing for the community, I think.
Yeah, and that's something that they've talked about with Shadowbringers, is they have all these loose ends that they've been establishing since 1.0, and they're like, we need to answer some of these. We can't just keep making new questions. We need to
bring Jeopardy back up. They started with answers.
We need to figure this out and start to kind of wind down, not to necessarily wind down to the end of the game, right? But we need to, at some point, this Ascian arc is going to end. And obviously there's things to do on the source after that, but we got to figure out, what are the Ascians? Where did they come from? What are they doing? We need to figure this out. And I think the way that they did it was something that I don't think anyone was expecting. And like you were saying, Rook, that scene where you come over and you see Amrot for the first time, I was breathless from that scene. I was just like, what is this? Holy crap. And then you get in there and you start into the NPCs, and then you run into Hythlodaeus, who's aware of what he's in, which might play into a little bit of what we're going to get into in a second here. But yeah, it's wild. I love it. I just, everything Amrot, I just give it to me. I want it. I want to know more about it. I want to know everything that there is to know.
I do want to talk about about Phoenix, because that was actually mentioned in the story, and I think
Yeah.
there's some really interesting implications for this. So, so Hippolytus basically says, "Hey, we've got this thing that was created, kind of. Can you come look at this, Emmett Silk?" And he's like, "Fine, whatever." Like
Exactly like that.
Yeah, I need a fellow professional's opinion on this matter. I've rented a debate room for us where we can
observe my creation.
You get the sense that like Solace, no, I'm calling him Solace. Emmett, it's like he appreciates his solitude. He doesn't want to be bothered.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
he's like a Sinian.
Yeah, I thought that too. I was like, wow, they're very similar in that way. Okay, okay, so we basically see like the creation of Phoenix, but it's not created in a normal way that things are created. It's kind of worded as like there was a drifting soul from someone that died that was on its way to the underworld. Okay, but it raged against the pull of the underworld, and it merged with like all this creation magic, and it was just super confusing. It was magic woven together with this drifting soul. So it's not a living thing.
Drifting tender.
And it's not a primal. We gotta make sure, because it's not a primal. But it's definitely like an accident. Okay. Okay. Now I went back and I looked at the description. You pull up the Firebird mount and you read the description, and it claims to be like an old Doman legend. But it actually appears, this is interesting to me, that the legend goes all the way back before the Sundering, and Phoenix precedes Zodiark and Hydaelyn themselves. I thought that was fascinating. It was just really, really neat.
That was one of my favorite parts going through Amarot, when you learn like, hey, you know, like that one weird like enemy? Yeah, they made it. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Because why not?
Yeah.
This makes me wonder if there might be some kind of tie, because for a long time, this is me just totally going off the rails with some speculation. But for a long time, I've wondered why we had the redundancy of both Phoenix, which obviously is a tie to the larger Final Fantasy series. If you've done Binding Coils and you know about Louis Soir and becoming Phoenix and all this sort of element that goes into that, and then the Firebird. And the fact that these are two very different entities, but they share a similar legend, seemingly source, something like that, right? And if the Firebird, at least, I love what you're thinking here, Bill, with maybe the Firebird is the actual original creation that somehow managed to stay intact and has existed through to our day. But I mean, is it possible that Louis Soir becomes Phoenix? Maybe he is a fragment of Hythlodeus that still remains, and that creates this imagery for him. Maybe, maybe the life stream, we don't really know how time works with the life stream, but is it possible as well that maybe even something happens there with a raging soul that, if it transcends time and space, could have had something to do with Louis Soir's death, merging with the life stream and creating a Phoenix? I don't know. It's very interesting that they decided to bring up Phoenix here and have this be something that is so relevant in this story.
I think actually the connection that you're making with Louis Soir, who obviously had us go around and pray to all these different altars of the 12, and we summoned all of that ether in his hopes to kind of prevent Dalamud, and that of course kind of brought about this primal, and we have precedent for that in a lot of other ways, but so that's not so out of place there. But I just think it's interesting that in this story, Emmett Silk is watching the Phoenix fly around, and it's like running into a wall. It's exploding. There are like broken feathers falling all over the place, and then it would just heal itself, and it would just like breathe fire, and it's like this out of control crazy bird, and Emmett Silk has to kind of like set it on its way. So Emmett Silk kind of like focuses it from being this out of control thing. And the irony is that the summoning of Phoenix is actually what prevented most of the Seventh Umbral Calamity that Emmett Silk actually wanted to take place. I actually think that's kind of interesting if you kind of put it in that perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, they talk about the way that this Phoenix is obviously not in its right mind. It's kind of crazy. It's running into windows and stuff. I know it's not Suzaku, but I saw a lot of parallels with that and like her state of mind. And
Good
just,
point.
you know,
Good point.
We know that Suzaku originally was just a bird that, for whatever reason, was fiery. And part of her story is that people think she is the legendary Phoenix. And everybody keeps mistaking her for that and hunting her. And she's rescued, right?
Yeah.
And that almost through that perception and the power of that perception of other people and with what she could be, she almost makes herself into the image of Phoenix, as we know, which could, again, all trace back to this exact same point in time, this same legend, this same historical moment.
Yeah. Well, we know that's how these primals work. Actually, there was an interview that Fusion did with Koji like years ago where Koji actually said something like this. He said, you know, Titan might look different depending on what society summons him. You know, it's kind of all based on their mind. And of course, we know that, you know, our buddy Magnai in the Azim Steppe, you know, what does he have? He's got a
Titan axe.
You know, he's got the axe. So we know that they've had their own summoning things that have gone on there. We know obviously from the Eden story that there are different ways that you can conceive various primals. Shinryu is, I mean, we had so much precedent for this. So it's not surprising that Phoenix, Firebird can be conceived in different places at different times in different ways. So I think
it's that idea of going back to primal essences is really is what it gets back to. And so you could still have, you know, a Phoenix or an Ifrit or a Leviathan, looks different, has two heads, drives around in a go-kart, but there's still like that little bit of it that's the same. And so, yeah, I mean, that could be the case for Suzaku. Maybe there's that one part of her that's drawing upon, you know, that Aether or that part of the underworld that's originally from this story.
Yeah.
She was absolutely inspired by it. Like, she knew about it, obviously, because people were hunting her for it. But eventually, when it came to that point, she was like, this is what I want to be, and so I'm going to be. And that's where her transformation came in. I really like the idea of Louisoix being part of Hythlodaeus, though. I think that's... I don't know how likely that is, but just that little detail would be really cool.
There's literally nothing else that supports it, but I mean, except for maybe the fact that we do see some similarities, I guess, with personality. You could
sort
almost
of a guidance, a point of guidance.
A guidance, a mentor, somebody who's passionate about the act of creation. I mean, we can kind of get all of these things, but I think without any other information, that is something that would be a wild speculation on my part, but it's not completely outside of the realm of possibility.
You know, that linking that a little further, I mean, thinking back to Binding Coil, we have those last few cutscenes where Louisoix is like, oh, I know I'm enthralled by Bahamut, like self-aware of what's going on, just like, you know, like there's a lot of parallels you can draw there.
Yeah, his knowledge too. I mean, it's possible that without even realizing it, he obviously could have just spent a lifetime learning, but the fact that he kind of accomplishes what nobody else would have been able to, this manifestation of the creation of the 12, even though it fails, there's something there that, I mean, maybe you could say, yes, this could have been an echo of a memory that he had of the art of creation.
He would theoretically have to be one of the 14 slivers of somebody who was powerful to manage something like that.
Yeah.
Today on Aetheryte Radio.
Everybody get your tin hats out. Let's do this.
Right.
Well, that's what Koji says. Speculate, 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 and that is what is taking place here. So, basically, Hythlodaeus has to get Emmett, who is a really strong mage, to kind of get the Firebird to calm down. And what he does is he gets him to assume this big, massive form that Hythlodaeus at the end has to like look up in the air and like see. And I get the impression that this is like the transformation that we saw in the final trial. Okay, in order to use his full power, he's got to transform into this like big monster thing. Super interesting. Okay, so that's the end of that half of the story. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay.
But you
I might have another tin hat to pull out. the idea of transformation is not new to us. Well, it's newer. There has been a series of cutscenes that to this day through Shadowbringers have really stood out for me from Stormblood. And I think Stormblood for me as an X-Pack was okay. I mean, we got really good characters, but what really caught my imagination were those final discussions that we have about the nature of the Echo. And they are some of the absolute last cutscenes in the whole game. But this idea that those who are possessed of the Echo are in theory able to harness the power of a primal and not be consumed by it and or become a primal themselves through Shinryu, through, gosh, even if we go back to Ysael, who is so tragic because when we learn what we learn in Stormblood, we have this whole discussion in Heavensward about Ysael and whether or not she has been corrupted by the force of Shiva. But we know she also has the Echo. So is it possible that she was able to use that force with her own actual power and control, and this whole time has been doubting herself because of what we think we know of the Echo at that point, but could use this power? And now we see here with Emmett Salk, the idea of transcending physical form to adopt a more powerful form, which theoretically can use and wield more Aether, and that looks very much like a primal, and that is a trial for us, which are usually primals, and it makes you wonder if the Echo is an extension of the memories or the resound, like the resonance between souls that may have existed all the way back to Amarot. Is it possible that Emmett adopting this form is a confirmation of this, that those who possess the Echo or may be, you know, a more intact soul could theoretically become a primal and still control it?
You know, this doesn't exactly address what you were talking about, but it occurs to me that when we get to the end of Academia, that transformation that Hythlodaeus does makes him into Quetzalcoatl, who is labeled specifically as a guardian force.
Yeah.
Which I assume is just a reference to 8, but maybe that's a thing that the ancients did. Maybe that's what Hades was supposed to be, guardian force.
Yeah, we do know some concrete information about the Echo. We know that it wasn't until the Agrius fell into into the waters there in Mordona, and that kind of like blew out whatever it was that it blew out, and that was the point to where the Echo was kind of opened up among people. It wasn't there before that. And yet primal summoning was taking place prior to that. So, how it all works out, I'm not exactly sure. But
one of these days, we're gonna find out what was at the bottom of that lake.
In the chat, kind of where
I know Anonymous wants to know.
Yeah, in the chat, kind of where I was leading. In 8, you junction a guardian force. In 14, primals, maybe they're a primal that you junction with or you form with, which is a perfect example in Shiva. Maybe not so much in Quetzalcoatl, but we don't exactly see what happens there. What was the other thing? There was one more thing, which is gone now, but the beginnings of a theory there, and it could be that the existence of a thing that is a primal that is created in that way is inspired by that guardian force transformation and or junction to begin with. The fact that it requires an immense amount of Aether to make a primal would be something that the people from then could just have done, could have manifested on their own. So
they're pretty good with doing that stuff.
Or are we just doing it wrong?
I mean, we couldn't make a robe out of a lightning cluster, so I think we just have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah. There's another example, Thornton.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it would be pretty epic if down the road at some point we were able to ourselves in the story or in some kind of fight or in some kind of quick time or in, whatever it is.
As long as I don't turn into a motorcycle, I don't care.
Oh, I was going to say, I just want it to be if we turn into a motorcycle. Well, okay. No, I mean it's...
You can be a motorcycle. Maybe we'll have choices.
That'd be very cool, though.
You can have a motorcycle and I'll pick something else.
That would be awesome. That could be, who knows, finale material. We don't know, but...
This is where we need Charles to be like, all right, so this is part of the summoner job. So yeah, think about that as you travel through the story, everybody. Guardian Force. What does it really mean?
That's actually a really good point, Xenedra. I had not registered that about the end of that dungeon. And I was feeling a little bit gypped that Quetzalcoatl got put at the end of a dungeon because 8's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But if it has that kind of significance, and I also, is that Hythlodeus that's there that turns into Quetzalcoatl?
I'm not 100%.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to go back now.
Because that would be an incredibly huge and important thing that I just did not pick up on.
Right.
I don't think that's.
I don't think it's a named character. Yeah.
He's not named.
I wonder if there's anything about his clothing. I think he just looks like a generic.
Yeah, go back and look at the document pickups and see.
If it is just a rando, still kind of applies.
So yeah.
Oh, for sure. It still demonstrates it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think we've seen the last of Hythlodeus, so
I hope not.
I'm pretty sure he's not gone. So
I'm waiting for him to like taking control of the Aetheryte simulation or whatever, right? Like, because he knows it's a simulation. Emmett's gone. He's like, somebody's got to keep this up, and so.
I mean, it's still there. It didn't go away.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's just game mechanics wise or if it's purposefully a thing.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
It's only they can just get rid of the area now. That we could be.
Yeah. Oh, that was a cool area, huh? And it's gone.
Neat. I was scared, honestly, that first playthrough that it was going to vanish after we went through. And there's like a little line where they say, oh, it was really powerful, so the magic's going to linger, or, whatever it is. And I was so glad because I wanted to just go through and pick everything out. But I do wonder if, as we get more into this, if those glimpses of Aetheryte are done, or if maybe we will get some kind of, even if it's just a mental landscape that we go through at some point, some kind of map or place that we get more of that would be really cool.
I think the reason my mind made the connection to Hythlodeus instead of Rando was that arena was sort of what I imagined when he's like, hey, come check out this thing I made. So
yeah, and
I imagine they all have workspaces that are sort of maybe similar. I don't know.
And it's part of the creation, the group of, like, it's the college or, training area for the creationists. So it would make sense that he would be there. Whether or not that's him specifically, I think that would be really, really cool if it was. That would be very, very interesting.
Everybody pay attention during your experts, please. Report back with your findings. That's my favorite one to get. I really like the twinning. I like all the lore behind the twinning, and I love the music in the twinning, but I always really like getting Academia as my...
I like Academia. My only gripe with Academia is the track. How it, after you do that first boss, it restarts it from the complete beginning instead of let's skip the radio tuning. It's just get back into the track. But that's it. I love it. I mean, I love 8. So going in there and seeing Quetzalcoatl at the end, and it's like Guardian Force. I was like, hell yes. And then just to be compounded with Eden after that, I'm like, this is so great.
I'll take it. And I love going in that area. Total tangent. Like going in the Eden area for the first time and being like, overworld map music.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Yes.
So good. So good.
Did we get to the end of this? Have we interrupted you?
No, I've been letting you all go to Speculation Disneyland, so you're good.
It's a good time.
It is good. It's good stuff. Okay. There is the second half of kind of the scene through which we see how Emmett kind of sees the world. And this is when he is Solace. Okay, Solace has not yet died. Okay, and it's also the time when Varys is still a teenager. So this is well before 2.0. I think this is basically before 1.0 times. Well, kind of around there. I don't know. Varys seems kind of old, but we'll see. Okay, and it's he's falling asleep in his chair. He's just and someone wakes him up. Varys wakes him up, and he's frustrated because he likes his solitude. He likes being left alone. And again, he's looking out. Excuse me. Looking out at the ether, and he's just upset at it. It's not good. He doesn't like his intrusion on his solitude. I mean, he's just like flat out bothered when others are trying to like bring things to his attention. Even though Varys is trying to do something, you kind of get this. Varys is like this. He doesn't have a lot of confidence, you know, like a little teenager. You know, I kind of picture Varys with his.
Yeah, that's such a weird way to
his
see
braces
him.
And his, you know, acne and stuff like that.
Dad, why don't you love me?
Yeah.
Why can't I do anything right?
Grandsire. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
That's right. Yeah. And you know, Emmett like expresses his disgust, and then like Varys like, what is it? Like, what's the problem? And Emmett is like, it's your body. Like, I just don't like your body. And you know, I sat there and I read that and I was like, what?
That's weird. Yeah.
What's going on?
That's weird.
And it's
Please
clear
explain.
He's looking at this guy's body, and it's like it's mortal, it's frail, and he's just like he's always comparing it to his Ascian brethren. You know, the unsundered Ascian.
They go so far as to be like, he is an exemplary example
Right.
of humanity. Like, this guy looks good, but you suck still because you're not.
Yeah.
You're not what I am.
He'll never. I mean, he's not an Elidibus or La Habrea.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
This makes so much sense, though, for his relationship with his own son.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the fact that under his reign, we've seen this obsession with perfection of physical form. We've seen this, you know, echo sort of project that they've been trying to do. We've seen the experiments he did on his own child that led him to becoming what he is. All of these things, I think you can kind of like trace back almost to this. If he grew up with a complex where this very important presence in his life was just saying these things to him, it kind of makes sense.
Absolutely.
And it's another one of those like feel bad for Emmett Selk moments too, because this idea of like, well, think about it. Like, he's got this offspring, like the pinnacle of like Garlean like physiology, right? But it's still not good. It's still not good enough. He's never gonna get what he wants.
Don't feel sorry for him. I don't.
All right.
I mean, I absolutely get where you're coming from, but I don't know. Sometimes you just have to appreciate what you have. And the best part of the story, and the part that rates it at 3 tiers, is where he actually does say, you know, there was a point in my life where I sort of had like a backslide and was like, you know, maybe this is good enough. I will take this wife. I will have this child. I will try and have a life. And then he's like, nope, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when you think about it, that had to be so devastating to him. The thing that almost gives him hope again is creation, which is something that that was the entire lifeblood of his people. And seeing that even in this world that's so different, something can be born, something can be created, this child that he had, only to have it torn away again. Another thing that has been destroyed, and to realize he must have had that moment where he went, no. Like this is wrong. This life is wrong. If this act of creation can be tarnished even here, even now, I have to destroy this. I have to bring back what was.
So that makes me feel bad for him. Like he did establish a connection with these people that he thought were subpar. He grew a love. He had feelings for this child, and like you said, ripped away. And it did absolutely just prove to him that this wasn't good enough.
Yeah, I think he probably knew by that point, having lived thousands and thousands of years. And remember, the soulless body, that's not his body. That's just a body that he assumed at that point. He knew that it was mortal flesh and blood. And the thing is, we learn about his son at the end of the story. We learn that his son dies way too early due to some absurd illness. He doesn't have a successor. And you know, it seems, I don't know, kind of when I reflect on his attitude, it's almost like he's already accepted the fact that until humanity is completely rejoined, he just has a disregard for all of them. He just doesn't, he might have a hope. Like he kind of makes this comment in the MSQ, like, oh, maybe you guys could come up with something, but yeah, you kind of bored me along the lines too. And you didn't really do what I wanted you to. But I think he's entirely pessimistic about, I don't want to say about the human race, but just about mankind and all together. And I think he's entirely justified for it from his perspective, you know.
And Rook, you're saying that that's probably why Varys and maybe even Xenos have that weird complex. And actually, somebody in chat and thinking about the story, he put that there on purpose. He told them that on purpose. He mentions that, I think, as like a sort of a hint. I feel like that was hinted at. Am I wrong? Am I crazy? You guys are like, I don't know. I feel like sure. There's some line in there, I think, where
I trust you.
Where at least the way I read it, it sounds like he sort of like plants that seed, like, I want you to know that you're not good enough so that you never feel good enough.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's honestly, I would not be surprised at all, because when you think about it, and when we talk about anything about characters, I mean, in this sense, I would say probably the relationship that he had, as we've seen with his progeny, was not a good one, probably even abusive. And I mean, I think
at least after the first one.
Yes, like I think a big part of that is that a lot of times if people are feeling lacking or dissatisfied or unhappy, it's not enough to just have that by yourself. And Emmett has had that by himself for so long. And so you spread that on others. You infect other people with that. You want them to know that they're not good enough. And that's why you treat them terribly, you know, because that's justified to you. And I think, he's just such a compelling character, knowing what we know now. Whereas previously, in all the patches leading up, I was just going, this guy seems both weird and rude. It's both of these things. But it makes so much more sense. I feel like he has such good motivations, well-rounded motivations.
Right. So the hint that I sort of gave myself, and reading it now, was it's a little bit of a stretch, I'll be honest. As he tells him this thing and he like turns his back and leaves the audience chamber, he sort of gives himself a self-deprecating smile. So he knows what he's done, is what I'm feeling there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
He knows he's planted that seed, that and maybe feels a little bit bad for it too. But you know what you did. Yes.
Well, there you have it.
That's it.
That's 4 stories.
All 4 of them.
Hopefully you got your money's worth out of it.
Did they say there were only going to be 4 this time?
I think they worded it as like, I don't know, when I saw it on Twitter, it was like, here's the 4th and final installment, unless I'm mistaken. But
yeah, so the actual site, there's only room on the bar for 4. And they when they've announced the first one, like you can tell like how many there's going to be.
Okay.
It's quite possible that we'll get extra ones. I mean, like, you know, they did release the Chronicles of Light book that had a couple extra ones, but that was also like 3 games worth of stories and then some extra ones. So I don't know. You know, maybe it'll be another few expansions before we get another book like that, or maybe they'll just be like, "Hey, surprise! Here's like one more." Maybe we'll, you know,
depends
towards
on how
the end.
Well, it's sold, I think, and currently I think it's sold out, so it had to have been well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe towards the end of 5.0, we'll get one that's like Hythlodaeus or something.
Please,
who knows?
Please,
just one whole book on that guy.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, that is gonna do it for this episode. A lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of speculation, lots of tinfoil hats.
Any more theories we want to get in before we finish it up?
Oh, I don't know.
I feel like poor Bill spent most of the time like telling us the stories, and we were just like jumping in like, here's our theory. So Bill, you have any theories you didn't get in?
I don't know if I could fit anything else into this at this
All
point.
right.
So, I'm good. So.
That's fair. All right. So that's going to do it for us here for Aetheryte Radio this week. If you want, you can contact us. You can email us at aetheryteradio@gamerscape.com. You can tweet at us at Aetheryte Radio. You can also reach us at Gamerscape on Twitter, on Facebook, and discord.gg/Gamerscape. We have an Aetheryte Radio channel there if you would like to talk about the show. So that's going to do it. Thank you to Rook and Bill for joining us, and we will see you here next week.
Goodbye.
Yep. Take care.
Well.